Welcome to Wyrd Wessex. My name is Andy.
And I'm Craig. So what are we talking about today, Andy?
Well, today is a special day, and as us English celebrates all things English by venerating a Roman saint who was born in Syria or around that region and likely never came to Western Europe, let alone Britain, to slay a mythical beast. But since the Middle Ages, this dragon slayer has been our patron saint, replacing the East Anglian king St Edmund.
Well, St Edmund didn't kill a dragon though, did he? He just sort of got shot full of arrows.
Fair point that, yeah. A tad less heroic. But while St George's story most likely never took place in what would become England, dragons have been part of our culture and psyche for over 1,000 years. Oh, and just to point out, for St George's Day, it looks like I'm wearing a dress, really.
For those that are just listening and not watching, Andy is dressed like Tommy Robinson.
Just like this is a tabard. This is. I've never seen our Tommy tabard. Maybe a prison one. So yeah,
our Tommy. Did you just say our?
Yeah, our Tommy. You got to say ARE.
All right. Maybe you're Tommy. I'm disassociating myself.
Definitely not my Tommy. But yes, dragons have been part of our culture and psyche for over 1,000 years. From portents of doom and dreaded foes to be conquered, to symbols of power and even friendly guardians. These creatures have captured our imagination, not only here in Britain, but across the whole world. Sarah Ban Brethnack once said, "It simply isn't an adventure worth telling if there aren't any dragons."
So from now on, we'll be telling stories exclusively about dragons.
Don't tempt me, Frodo!
All right, well, for today at least. So today we're going to be telling some British dragon stories, as well as talking about the meaning of dragons in our psyche, their origins, possible explanations, what they represent, and so on. So join us as we delve into ancient layers and misty moors where, at least in folklore, the roars of dragons still echo in the hills. So the first mention of dragons in England is, of course, in the skies of Northumbria in 793. Here, terrible portents came about over the land of Northumbria and miserably frightened the people. These were immense flashes of lightning, and fiery dragons, or Fyren Draken, were seen flying in the air. Now, this was most likely a comet, but perhaps it was truly a portent to come, because later in the chronicle we read, "Not long after that, in the same year, on 8th of June, the ravages of heathen men wretchedly destroyed God's church on Lindisfarne with plunder and carnage."
Bloody Vikings.
Coming over here, stealing our plunder.
Now you're sounding like Tommy.
So, this was, of course, the first recorded attack, barring a brief skirmish on Portland in Dorset by the Vikings. Possibly a coincidence, or perhaps the Fyren Draken was a herald of the dragon-prowed longship sailing to torment the folk of Northumbria.
Dragon folklore comes into prominence in the later Middle Ages in Britain. While I initially wanted to focus on those dragon stories in the weird lands of Wessex, there are some fascinating and important ones all across the country, so we'll save the Wessex stories for another time.
So the weird wyverns of Wessex?
Nice, yeah, that works. So this first story is we're doing St George's Day dirty and leaving England, and this one is from Wales, from Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historiam Reginum Britanniae.
Been practicing that.
Yeah, just over and over. Absolutely not my new band name. Now, it's said that a long time ago in the hills of Snowdonia, the High King of Britain, Vortigern, wanted to build a fortress in the village of Bedgalet. However, every time his men built their foundations upon the hill he decided to raise a fortification on, there would, over the following evening, be a great shaking of the earth. They would wake to find up these stones sort of tumble down. None of the builders seemed to know what was to blame, and so his wise men and women were consulted, his seers. After much deliberation, it was decided upon their advice that they needed to send men out into the world to seek the blood of a child. But not just any child. This had to be a born... It was decided upon their advice that he needed to send his men into the world to seek the blood of a child. But not just any child. This was to be a boy born of no mortal father. This was key to ending these troubles. After searching the land far and wide, following whisper and rumour, Vortigern's men found him. They didn't need to snatch him, nor bind him. Indeed, it's as if this boy was waiting for them. Being brought before the king, he was welcomed, he was dressed well and feasted. For sacrifices were kind of out of fashion at that point, but enough remembered the respect and honour that was owed to those who were about to pay the ultimate price. For while they'd said the king needed him, they didn't tell him the entire plan, that at sundown they would take him to the base of the hill, cut his throat, and spill his blood upon the earth, as the seers had advised. However, when the sun went down again, it seemed like the boy knew what was coming. He held up a hand to stay those who had come to escort him to the hill. Instead, he walked there of his own accord, calm, but with purpose. It seemed to all those present this boy of no more than 15 summers had all the authority of a lord. "I know," spoke the boy, "that your wise men have told you to sprinkle my blood here, just as I know that you will not have your problem of a crumbling tower fixed by any amount of blood, mine or otherwise." All were listening now with bated breath, including the king. "Have your men dig into the hilltop, and beneath it they shall find a pond." And so Vortigern ordered his men to dig, and sure enough they broke through to a body of water. "Now, Lord King, dig a channel and drain the pond. Beneath it lies a large flat stone, although I suppose your wise men knew less of that than they did of the pond." With a scornful look towards his advisors, Vortigern ordered his men to dig a channel. And he had many men with him who were camped around that hill, so they made short work of it, and soon the pond was drained to reveal a large flat stone. "Have your men remove the stone, Lord King, and there will be revealed the source of your troubles with this tower." Without being told, now following the boy's word over their own kings, the stone with much effort was dragged away by the men. All gathered to look down into the hole. A rush of hot air and smoke greeted them. But as it cleared, those gathered stumbled back, for beneath them were two great winged beasts coiled about one another, one red, one white. Their eyes slowly opened. Teeth were bared, and the king's men feared for their lives, but the dragons were not snarling at those who had awoken them, but at one another. With twin roars that shook the hill they stood upon, and great beats of their leathery wings, the creatures soared upwards into the sky, snapping and clawing at one another in hatred. Fire flashed as each tried to savage the other, all while those below could only watch with awe and terror. Well, all save one. The boy looked up with keen interest. Eventually, the white dragon took the upper hand, ravaging the throat of its opponent. The red dragon, hissing blood leaking from a terrible wound, flew away, with the white one in slow pursuit. The hill fell silent, exhaling breath they did not even know they'd been holding on to. Then, the boy broke the silence, with a voice that did not seem to belong to a child but a wise old man. "The red dragon is not dead, but badly wounded. She will fly away to tend her wounds, and while she is wounded, we will see our land struggle, for she is this land. The white dragon is the invader." Those who dared spared a look at their king, for Vortigern had invited the hated Saxons to Britain to help defend their shores, and they had been taking more and more British land ever since. "But when she has rested and healed, when she is needed the most, she will return, and we will see our fortunes rise once more." The place was fortified, but the talk was not of this new castle, not even the dragons after a while, although they would leave their mark on the people of that land long after the physical signs of the battle had faded. But the talk was of the boy. Merlin wished, or better known as Merlin. And so, the Ddragoch, or the Red Dragon, has ever since been the emblem of Wales. Adopted by the English crown in the time of the Tudors, partly as a nod to their heritage, and partly to win over the Welsh, who had long fought the descendants of their invaders, who, even when fighting alongside the English, still held out for the day that the Red Dragon would return, bringing their independence with it.
Some still do, I think.
I think you're right. So yes, that was one of the first dragon stories I ever heard, actually, which is sort of an origin one for the Ddragoch. That's the sort of one of the cool Welsh origin ones, and ties in a bit of Merlin there as well. We can chat about the origin of these later.
So, taking us forward in time and back to Northumbria, in the 1400s, there was a man named John Lambton, the son of the local lord. He tried to be a dutiful son, but he was a bit of a tearaway. While God-fearing, he found himself bored by church services. He was much more fond of music, dancing, hunting, and fishing. The weather had been foul all week and had scuppered John's plans to go fishing, but when the sun rose on Sunday morning, it promised a beautiful day. The perfect day for a spot of angling, so he of course decided one missed sermon would not be a terrible thing and gathered his equipment, making for the river. Now, fishing, like his other hobbies and many more, were banned on Sundays, but he thought, what's the worst that could happen?
Ominous.
Well, as John approached the river, he came across an old man, a hermit, sitting on a rock.
Off fishing are we, young sir? On a holy day?
He thought of lying, but with his rod, traps and lunch, he didn't look as if he was off to Sunday service. He thought of lying, but with his rod, traps and lunch, he didn't look as if he was off to Sunday service. I am, but I notice you're not at church either, old man.
My soul is of my own concern. But hear me now. You fish today and you'll catch nothing but the devil's work.
If John was a worse sort, he'd have had the old man flogged for speaking to him like that, but his own guilty conscience was already gnawing at him, and so he let the insult slide and left him. However, after a day of fishing, John hadn't caught a thing. Serves me right, he supposed. God must have kept the fish's bellies full and uninterested in his bait. He began to pack up his things, hearing the church bells chime in the distance and knowing that the service was ending. However, as he did, he noticed something had taken the bait. After a bit of a struggle, he brought his catch from the water. Whatever it wasn't a fish. It looked more like a serpent or a reptile with small legs and a mouth full of sharp little teeth. He didn't much fancy eating it, but what a curiosity. He decided to throw it in his bag and take it home with him. But as he walked, listening to the thing hiss and snap, he felt uneasy. Nothing but the devil's work, the old man had said. He suddenly didn't want to take this creature home at all. He thought of knocking it on the head, but one peek inside the bag put him off that notion. The thing would probably bite his fingers off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's where the song comes from. So, he didn't want to empty it out, as he had a feeling in its rage it would give chase, and didn't much want to be seen running away from the small creature either. It was then that he came across a well on the outskirts of the village. Perfect. Without much thought, he emptied the bag into it, nodding with satisfaction when he heard the distant splash. Let's see you come after my fingers from there. Time passed and John grew up. He grew into responsibilities too, and to go some way to making up for his rebellious years of youth, he went on crusade. While he was gone, all was not well in the village, however. Firstly, the well at the edge of the village became poisonous. They thought about blocking it up, but noxious gases rose up from it whenever they approached to do such a thing, and so they decided to simply stay away. Then, come one spring, lambs began to vanish from the fields. The shepherds and hunters searched far and wide, but could find no wolves that could have taken them. And then adult sheep. And then cows. Could it have been thieves? Outlaws? All was revealed when one day the evil lurking in the well decided its lair was too small and it left. A trail of destruction led from the well to a nearby hill. There, wrapped and coiled about it, was a great worm. Now, this wasn't an earthworm or even a slow worm, but a worm, a wingless dragon, like a giant salamander. And the people of Lambton did not have the courage or the skill at arms to remove or kill it. And so they had to sit by and watch the beast take whatever it wanted: cattle, horses, and even times of hardship, people. All of this happened over 7 years, and when after that time John Lambton returned from his crusades, an older, wiser man, wearing his scars as badges of honour, he found his father's estate nearly destitute. The remaining cows had stopped producing enough milk, the lambs that were born were sickly and often died. Firstly, the people of Lambton had attempted to kill the beast themselves, but many were slain in the effort. Then questing knights and mercenaries had tried their luck. Each was either wounded or killed by its razor-sharp teeth, tearing claws or by the monster coiling around them and squeezing the life from them like a snake. Any warrior that managed to cut any part of the worm's long body would, in his final moments, see it begin to reattach itself, becoming whole once more. Finally, in a last-ditch effort to stop the rampage, the elderly Lord Lambton had, upon spotting the worm close to his castle, sated the creature's monstrous hunger from his own stores, each day seeing the creature arriving at the castle and being given milk and meat before watching it trundle back to its hill to slumber once more. This is what John returned to. He was a changed man now and resolved to kill the beast and save the land of his birth. But how? As he pondered this, he found himself walking to the river where it all began, and as if history repeated itself, by the rock he once more met the elderly hermit.
I was wondering when you'd return, brave knight.
And to this, what brought such evil here? Poisoned wells, stolen cattle, a great beast? Where did it all come from? Why is it happening? The old man fixed John with a look.
You know full well where this has come from, young lord. You know why it is happening. Nothing but the devil's work.
And suddenly John knew that creature he had disposed of was a baby, a hatchling, and in his absence it had grown and grown. This is all my fault. I must put an end to it. But how? It cannot be cut apart, and my father has barely 24 spearmen left in his guard. The old man smiled then and told John that the first step was admitting his part in it, and due to that, only he could slay it. He then told John exactly what he had to do. The creature was not only seemingly impervious to blades and grew back what was cut from it, but also protected by devilish magic. He must first fashion armour from those remaining spearheads in his father's armoury, jutting out from him at all angles so that the beast could not wrap itself around him and squeeze the life from him, nor could it eat him. He must lure it from its hill and fight it by the nearby River Ware. Once it had died, John was to hack it up as quickly as possible. He would see why, when and if he defeated his foe. And finally, to counteract the very protection of the devil that surrounded the longworm, after killing the beast, he must kill the first thing he loves that he sees, or else see a curse fall upon his family so that for 9 generations no lord of the Lambtons would die peacefully in their beds. This last part worried John more than the fight, but nonetheless, he thanked the old man and set about having the blacksmiths in Lambton Castle get to work on the armour. While he did this, a plan came to him. His old faithful hunting dog, one that he had spent many years in his youth with, was still alive. He told his father of his plans and that, waiting with the dog in the bushes nearby, he was to release the hound to him when he blew his hunting horn 3 times. John would reluctantly kill the dog and spare his family the curse. And so John arrived at the river and called his challenge to the dragon. Dragons are prideful creatures, and this one was no different. Battle was joined. It raged for nearly half an hour, which to any who have fought with sword and shield will tell you seems like a day and a night. The beast flailing and roaring, John ducking and blocking, his shield broken to splinters and his lance snapped, was down to his sword. He was exhausted and soaked. The worm was furious and hungry. The dragon's anger and lust for victory overcame its senses, and despite the spearhead studding the knight's armour, it coiled itself around him, ready to squeeze the life from him. John was by this point too tired to stop the creature if he wanted to, and so found himself in the midst of the coiling beast. However, the tighter the worm wound itself around him, the more injured it became. John laughed with what breath was left in him as the dark blood gushed into the flowing waters. The crusader felt the squeeze loosen as the creature slid from him, falling back with a cry in the waters. Wasting no time, John began to hack up the dragon into sections, separating body, head, leg, and tail. The locations of their jewels suddenly made sense to him now, as he watched with relief as the river's current began carrying the chunks of worm away, not giving it a chance to reform. The worm of Lambton was no more, and John was victorious, it seemed.
It seemed?
Well, John did the last thing he was bidden to do. He raised his hunting horn and blew 3 blasts. His father, however, overjoyed not only to see their nightmare end, but his son living at the end of the ordeal, did not release his hound, but ran forward to embrace his son. John, worried at the curse as he was, could not bear to kill his own father, not after all this, and so he called forth his hound, which came bounding over. After fussing his old friend with tears in his eyes, he did the deed, and hoped that it would be enough. We do not know how the Lord Lambton died, nor his dragon-slaying son. However, a century later, Robert Lambton would drown swimming. Some say dragged down by the dragon reformed. A century after that, both Sir William Lambton and his son fell at the battles of Marston Moor and the storming of Wakefield, respectively, within a year of one another. And a century after, Henry Lambton and Sir William's grandson was travelling home along the Lambton Bridge in his carriage when he suddenly died. His brother is said to have begun sleeping with a great whip at the side of his bed to see off any assailants, or indeed the worm itself, should it reform and decide to take its revenge. He did die peacefully in his own bed, despite being a career soldier. Perhaps the curse had run its course. Maybe as the family line passed to him, Henry having no sons, it did not carry over.
Or maybe dragons are scared of massive whips. And incidentally, that is why I sleep with a whip next to my bed. So, yes, interestingly enough, something I read about the Lambtons is, I think recently, like the current Lord Lambton, when he was born, I think it's that one or the one before him. When he was born, he was like the last child. All of his older siblings, there was like 6 sisters or something. And being a bit traditional, they like had to have a male heir, and like they decided it was like some curse or something. And when they actually had this child born, this boy born, they had this massive bonfire built on top of the Dragon Hill. And like to celebrate, there's a monument up there, and they had a big bonfire set up there as like a celebration. So the family are still quite into the folklore, but I guess you would be if you had a dragon slayer in your family. So, I've one more dragon story for us, and this one is from my home county of Hertfordshire. So this story takes place a long time ago. Far, far back, nearly 1,000 years ago, when the land was in peril. For you see, a cruel man, William of Normandy, William the Bastard, later to be known as William the Conqueror, had invaded these shores. He had killed the last Saxon king at the Battle of Hastings and taken the throne of England for his own. And when the folk of the north rebelled against him, people suffered, villages were destroyed, and the countryside burns. And when evil deeds like this take place, well, nasty things like dragons find a root in the world. Now, our story takes place in a town called Brent Pelham, and the lord of that place, a man by the name of Piers Shonks, a Breton that had come over with the Conqueror, was away. He was off fighting in William's wars in France, and he doesn't come into it just yet. But in Pelham, under a gnarled oak tree, a hollow under the hill, a dragon made its lair. Now, this dragon was attracted to this evil that was going on. But when the harrying of the North, this great misdeed by William, punishing the North for their rebellion, was going on, and the dragon turned up, everything that could be burned had been burnt, everything that could be eaten had been eaten, everything that could be stolen had been stolen. And so it turned its greedy eyes south toward the lands of Pelham. It came on an autumn day, as the crops were being gathered. Soaring on wings the colour of burning embers, it swooped down, gushing forth fire, setting alight to great swaths of the countryside. Now the townsfolk, they grabbed what weapons and tools they could, pitchforks and mattocks, but they could not fend off the beast, and so they ran to safety. The only safety they could find, the only stone building within a town of wooden ones, and this was the Church of St. Mary's. And there they huddled, they hid, and they prayed for deliverance. But as they prayed, one man took a step further. He wrote a letter. The village priest, the only literate man in the village, wrote a letter and managed to get it away off to France to reach their lord, begging for help. Now, in his campaign tent, as Piers Shonks, the Lord of Pelham, walked up and down reading the note for the 5th time, he was shaking his head and tutting. "I just don't believe it, Alfred," he spoke to his Saxon servant. A dragon, really? I mean, wildfires start naturally, wolves take cattle and sheep. No. This must be something else. This is superstitious nonsense. A metaphorical dragon, perhaps. Now, Alfred, his servant, was a little bit less worldly, a little bit more rural, but he believed in things like dragons. "My lord," he said, "this might be God punishing us for our evil deeds, don't you think? It's been known to happen before." Piers was unconvinced, but it did seem like his villagers needed his help, and so he promised he would petition the king and ask for release to go back and see what was going on. And in a rare act of charity, William agreed, and so Alfred, Piers, their hunting hounds and their horses were soon on a small boat going across the channel, sailing back to England and to Brent Pelham. It was as they rowed towards his lands that they saw the first signs of the devastation. Where fields that should have been freshly cut and neat there was now nothing but blackened stubble. Where barns should have been standing tall, full of grain ready for the winter's store, there was nothing but ruin. No ordinary forest fires had started this. But it was when they got to Pelham itself that the true extent of the devastation dawned upon them. For you see, looking down the long street that was once a bustling hive of activity, marketplaces, taverns, shops, there was nothing but devastation, destruction, ruin, charred timbers, burnt embers still smouldering. As they reached what was Alfred's favourite tavern, the servant dismounted with a sigh, looking around to try and find something, maybe a keepsake, maybe a bottle of wine. But instead he found himself falling into a sinkhole. After being pulled out by his lord, they both looked down in horror, for this was no sinkhole, but a giant reptilian footprint, the size of a boat. "I don't think, my lord, this is a metaphorical dragon's footprint," said Alfred. Soon, the folk of Pelham came out nervously from the church of St. Mary's. Their lord had arrived. He had come back to them. He'd brought with him food and supplies. They rejoiced to see him. He would make this right. And he promised he would. He was a great hunter, a renowned warrior. He would find this beast. He would slay it. And so, the very next morning, Piers armed himself with mail, helmet, shield, sword, and lance. He rode off with his hunting hounds keen on the scent of the serpent, with Alfred riding dutifully and fearfully behind him. Soon the hounds picked up the scent, sniffing in the undergrowth. They started following the tracks through the woods that led to the hill with the yew tree. As they approached it, they stopped, for before the yew tree the ground was cracked and blackened and burnt. Smoke emanated from the cave beneath it. The dogs stopped, their hackles raised, their teeth bared. The horses were whinnying, neighing in fear. Eyes flashed in the night, in the darkness of that cave. Then teeth. Then a flash of red scales. A roar. A beating of wings. And then a great ball of fire shot forth, hurtling towards them. They managed to scatter, Piers going one way, Alfred the other. "This is it," shouted Piers. "Alfred, take the hounds and hand me my lance." "I will, lord, good speed." And so, armed for battle, Piers aimed his lance directly at the dragon's chest and rode forward. But before he could reach the beast, another bolt of flame came searing towards him. He managed to catch that one on his shield, which sizzled and crackled and burnt to a crisp on his arm. He got rid of it quickly, but while he was a seasoned warrior and he had seen many campaigns with his horse beneath him, the horse wasn't really signed up to fight things like dragons. And so, in fear, it had reared up, dumping him from the saddle and riding off into the woods. Piers picked himself up in a flash, and not knowing what else to do, he drew his sword and hurled it straight at the beast. It turned and twisted in the air, catching the sunlight, glinting as it spun faster and faster, and finally striking the beast square in the chest. The monster roared and writhed in pain, but this just seemed to make it angrier. A third ball of fire came soaring towards the knight. He rolled and ducked behind a boulder, the flames searing all around him. And then he sighed. He'd lost his horse, he'd lost his lance, his shield, his sword. He had let the people of Pelham down. He was going to die, and then they were going to die, and it all was going wrong. He did not know what to do. But then he heard it. "Beastie! Come and get me! Over here!" He looked around, and Alfred, his servant, with his discarded lance waving about in the air, was trying to beckon the dragon over to attack him instead. It turned its ire upon the servant, growling and prowling towards him, teeth bared, ready to make a meal of him. Piers seized the opportunity to strike. He ran onto the dragon's tail, up the spines on his back, climbing and climbing until he reached its neck and then its head. And so, putting his hand up, Alfred shouted, "My lord, catch!" threw the spear. Alfred had thrown true. Piers caught the spear, yanked back the dragon's mouth, and plunged the weapon down its throat. The beast roared and writhed in agony, and then tumbling down, it died. Piers picked himself up, dusted himself off, and together with his servant Alfred, they made their way to the fallen beast and prodded it with a foot, jabbed it with a stick. But it was dead. They had done it. They had slain the monster. They had saved Pelham. All cheered. But then the cheers died in their throats, for another figure emerged from the cave's mouth. This was no dragon, though. This walked on 2 feet, was about a man's height, maybe a little taller, with a cloak that seemed to shimmer like flame. Now, these legs that he walked on, these 2 legs, they did not end in boots nor bare feet, but cloven hooves, and upon the figure's head, 2 horns sat. He surveyed the battlefield with a sneer, pointing a long, bony finger out until it was jabbing straight towards the knight. "Curse you, knight! You have slain my favourite pet, but now in me your match you have met. In 10 years next, my dear peers, your death shall flood Pelham in tears. Your soul will be mine, of this I have no doubt, whether you are buried in a church or out. This is the curse I lay upon thee. My name is Old Nick, and in 10 years you shall belong to me." And with that, the devil disappeared in a gout of fire back to hell. Piers sank to his knees, head in his hands. Alfred rushed over, panicking. My lord, don't worry. We won't let the devil take you. We'll escape. If we go now, we can catch the tide. We'll go back to France. No, said Piers. We will not hide. We will not go to France. We cannot escape the devil in France. By all accounts, I think that's where the devil's from. No, we will stay in Pelham. We will rebuild. And I have 10 years next. The devil will not have the best of me. Just you watch. And so, the people of Pelham rebuilt their village. The work was hard, the hours long, and they suffered, but each year it got easier. They rebuilt what was broken, raised what had been burnt to the ground. But as each year passed, as things got easier for the village of Pelham, they got harder for Piers. Each year he weakened and weakened. Coughs took longer to go away, the chills set in, and when the 10th year was approaching, Alfred looked upon his greyed, stooped master and knew that he was dying. The curse had nearly come for him. And it was a terrible curse, for you see, if you were buried in a church or out. Now, it was the habit of things to have nobles buried inside a church under the flagstones in the building itself, and the peasants buried without. In a church or out, your soul will be mine. It seemed there was no escaping the devil, but Piers did not let him get him down. And then, one day, when the lord of the manor, Piers Shonks, was abed with his sickness, a knocking came upon the door. "Here I am, Piers. 10 years have passed. We've waited long enough, and you're mine at last. Now we have business, you and I, so if you'll be so kind, hurry up and die!" "Alfred," called Piers from his sickbed, "take me to the door. Bring my bow and my arrows, and there leave me." Alfred was dismayed. "Leave you, my lord? Why would I leave you? You must leave me, but stay within earshot. You must hear what is said, but I do not want you there. I must face this alone." And so the servant helped his master one last time out of bed and to the door. "Here I am, Satan," said Piers, clearing his throat and trying to stand as tall as possible. "I am ready, but before I go with you, I would ask you one last boon. Be a gentleman and give a dying man a last request." The devil sneered. "How traditional! I suppose it's for the best. If it'll shut you up, what is your last request?" And so Piers explained that all he wanted to do was to string his bow, his favourite hunting bow, one more time, pull the string back, and loose an arrow across his estate's lands. And wherever that arrow fell, he would be buried. For after all, it did not matter whether he was buried in or church or out. He was going with the devil, so what did it matter? "Is that it? Is that all? What a waste of time. But remember, Piers, in a church or out, your soul will be mine." And so it was agreed. Piers, with a shaking hand, strung his bow, took one deep breath of the sweet air that he would never breathe again, and drew the weapon back. Further and further, with a shaking hand, he drew it right back to his ear, and then he loosed. The arrow flew true and far. Piers could be seen mouthing a silent prayer as it flew across the lawn, across the tops of the trees, into the Pelham village of Pelham itself, where it flew down and struck the north wall of St. Mary's Church. Now, the knight smiled to himself. For you see, the curious thing about that is, if he is buried in the wall of the church, he is neither in it nor out of it. The devil had been beaten at his own game, and he knew it. "Curse you, Piers Shonks! You have me beat. You tricked me fair, and no more shall we meet. I'll go below while you have your rest, and never more shall I offer a last request." And with that, the devil once more disappeared in a fireball down to hell, and with a coughing laugh, Piers Shonks fell dead. Alfred picked up his lord, carried him down to the village, and gave him to the monks of the church. And he bade them bury that knight, that bravest of knights, in the wall, so his soul would be protected from the devil. And if you go to the village of Brent Pelham, to this day, if you go to the north wall of St. Mary's Church, you will see the effigy of a knight laid to rest in there. And above, with a bit less rhyming, is a shortened version of this story. The story of the bravest knight in Hertfordshire, Piers Shonks, who saved the town from the fires of a dragon and spared his own soul from the fires of hell.
And that man was Andy's father.
I mean, you know, I've never seen them in the same room. So that story I usually tell with fire breathing, but I'm not going to do that while recording in my living room.
I mean, that's lack of dedication to the podcast, to be honest.
It is.
You
really.
say you can breathe fire. I've never seen you do it. I've heard stories, but
you've seen pictures of me breathing fire. Actually,
Photoshop pictures.
I was going to say the only time that we were going to be in the same place when I was doing fire breathing, half of Purbeck
couldn't do it.
Yeah, half of Purbeck was on fire, so we weren't allowed fires. Craig couldn't cook. I couldn't breathe fire.
Yeah. So again, you keep telling me you're a fire breather, but
all right. Showdown. I'll just turn up to your living room one day when I'm next coming to record with you and just.
Yeah, maybe not.
Can't do it, can I? But yeah, a little bit different in format. Told a few sort of stories, I guess, in a slightly longer, more storytelling way. But we are going to have a bit of a chinwag about dragons now, aren't we?
Are we?
Yeah.
I don't know. You wrote this one.
Well, it's you. It's you now.
Oh, it's me. Right. Yeah. Oh, I see. I'm the bit that says Craig. Okay.
Mm.
So we covered it briefly earlier, but how did we come to have a dragon slayer for a patron saint? We mentioned that St. Edmund was the patron saint of England before St. George, a former king of East Anglia who was murdered by the Great Heathen Army by being tied to a tree and shot full of arrows, apparently showing no fear as God would protect his soul. For this, he was made a saint and the patron saint of England. I think they do that in the Vikings TV show, don't they?
They do. They might do. They definitely do it in the Last Kingdom.
I think they do something similar. Maybe it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's a long
No. No.
time
I
since
think.
I
I
watched
think they
it.
do. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, he remained so until the later Middle Ages. It's popularly believed that Richard the Lionheart put George in place of Edmund after visiting his supposed tomb in Leyda while on the Third Crusade, praying to the saint for victory and winning a great one shortly after.
Now we could call this the beginnings of the English cult of St. George. He was certainly popular, but wasn't yet the patron saint. It was actually Edward III, around the time that he formed the Noble Order of the Garter, a knightly fellowship that bore the arms of St. George, that officially changed our saint from English king to Middle Eastern dragon slayer.
It's that garter like socks, like the Order of the Garters.
Yeah, basically. So actually, so the story goes. It's like Wessex attachment. It was at a ball in France that everyone was dancing, and the Countess of Salisbury's garter slipped off, and the gathered nobles all laughed at her. But rather than laughing at her, Edward stooped down and picked it up for her, and it was seen as like the chivalric thing to do. And so, just to virtue signal a bit, I guess. He was like, not only am I going to do that, I'm then going to go and form an entire order based around that one all right thing that I did.
Wow.
I know,
I was
right?
taking the piss. All right, so the folklore attached to this is that the English king invoked the aid of the saint before the Battle of
Cressy.
Cressy,
Cressy.
Crecky,
Oh,
Creaky,
I forget you've never been a medieval reenactor.
Creaky, Creaky,
Cressy. Cressy. It's Cressy.
Cersei. No, that's
Yeah, why not? Game of Thrones. Well, that's got
all right.
dragons in, right?
Close enough. All right. The folklore attached to this is that the English king invoked the aid of the saint before the Battle of Cressy, which against the odds was a resounding victory for the English.
I'd be thanking the archers personally.
Says the archer. Now, this wasn't the first time George was venerated in England. It was in Fordington in Dorset in the time of Alfred the Great that we first know of a church dedicated to the saint. But there is a good chance that he was venerated in other churches across the country, now lost to time. Now, the dragons in the stories we have told are clearly different from one another, the beasts coming in different shapes and sizes and wielding different abilities.
The first one we'll think of is a winged flying beast with scales, the sort that St. George and Piers Shonks go up against. These fall into two categories usually, dragons and wyverns. Dragons have 4 legs, wyverns are smaller and have 2. They tend to be a little bit more agile as well. The bigger dragons tend to be a little bit smarter and more majestic. They're also related to drakes, which in their build and manner are similar to worms, although they don't crawl but stride along on longer legs in search of their prey. In all the varying stories, they've got the ability to breathe fire, but it's more consistent with dragons. Worms, the more salamander crawling type ones, like the Lambton Worm, probably date back to Anglo-Saxon and Viking mythology. They crawl upon their bellies, they're sometimes blind, and they do not fly or breathe fire. They do, however, occasionally breathe poison. Tolkien used these as well as traditional dragons.
Some dragons dwell not in barrows or in the skies, but in the water. There are many water-based serpents. The Knucker is one that made its lair in supposedly bottomless ponds known as Knucker holes. When people were drowned in these ponds, perhaps their corpses being held down by reeds or underwater currents pulling them into nooks and crannies, the Knuckers would be blamed. Jormungandr, the monstrous child of Loki, could be seen as one of the most famous examples of this type, although in modern times that title is undoubtedly held by Nessie.
I've heard of her.
That depends, because some people would say that Nessie isn't a dragon, but all right.
That's true, but it could be. It could be
Could be a series of giant eels.
tied together.
Could be an otter. Could be many things. Could be a plesiosaur. Oh no, they proved it wasn't a plesiosaur, didn't they? There's no.
Yes. If only someone did an episode on that sort of thing.
Lastly, some offshoots are closer to birds but are classed as dragons. The best example being the dreaded cockatrice. I'm getting a thumbs up, guys. All right. The result of a hen's egg that has been sat upon and hatched by a toad, the creature is built akin to a wyvern. It has a lizard's body, a dragon's tail, feathered wings with bird-like legs, and a cockatiel's head. I'm just wondering what score that gets you in a D&D campaign.
Right, it's pretty nasty. You don't want to come against one.
Right, okay. We'll roll a D6.
Yeah, a D20 maybe.
All right. I can tell I don't play. I'm just trying to sound like I'm down with the kids. So the worst part is that if its gaze falls upon you, it will turn you to stone. It can only be defeated by getting it to see itself in a mirror. Or of course, keeping your eggs far away from your pet toad. I have a toad in my polytunnel.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh shit, you've got chickens as well, man. Watch out.
Yeah, man. Exactly. They're next to each other.
I'm gonna turn up like to sort of to Craig's studio, like ready to record, and he's just gonna be there in stone with his cup of tea.
Worst ways to go, looking at the current state of the world.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So Dragon Slayers, it's an archetype that we all know. A mismatch, the brave underdog fighting overwhelming odds to save a town, a maiden, or both. However, this goes deeper. While giant slaying stories, for example, are often common heroes, usually called Jack, toppling these mean-spirited monsters, dragon slayers are a different breed, quite literally. In these stories, they tend to be nobles, knights, or even kings. St. George was a knight, or at least a Roman officer or a senior churchman. The slayer of the Lambton Worm was a local noble's son. Merlin. Even in fiction, those who bring dragons low are often special in their ancestry. Bard the Bowman in The Hobbit, while living as a commoner at the time, was descended from the kings of Dale. In fact, all of Tolkien's dragon slayers, Bard, Fram the Northman, Arendelle, and Turin, they're all highborn. And this isn't accidental. Tolkien understood the lore that he was weaving and stealing from.
So while dragons are mostly the villains in traditional Western folklore, they're often seen as being noble and majestic as well. Perhaps it takes not just nobility of spirit, but blood in these tales to defeat this type of evil that dragons represent. The bad side of these traits are defeated by the exemplary good side of them.
Exactly, and this could be tied into the deeper meanings of dragons themselves. As with a lot of these monsters, they can be tied to allegory. Dragons represent greed, but they also invoke something old, something primeval. There is an argument to be made that these dragons are representative of older ways, pagan beliefs that only good, godly heroes can cast into oblivion. When you look at images of St. George, you can see why a nation at war, as often as medieval England, would revel in it. Gone is the meek, holy King Edmund, praying serenely as he meets his demise at the hand of the pagan Norseman. And in his place is a warrior, plate-armoured, lance in hand, casting down a serpent, the very embodiment of all that is wicked and perhaps pagan in the world. If you see an image of St. Michael the Archangel plunging his lance into the serpent underfoot, it's a very similar sight to that of St. George, a holy warrior for an age of violence, and one that not only invokes notions of victory against overwhelming odds, something the English mindset has always been drawn towards, but the fact that it's a saint, it kind of seems to confirm that by following in his footsteps, they're doing the right thing, that God is on their side.
Dragons share similar traits through much of British folklore. They're driven, as mentioned, by greed. They hoard gold. Often we hear of their appetites being sated by milk. This could be that one dragon story was spread and co-opted to different locations, as we find with both the slayers of the Lambton Worm and the Biston Dragon donning spiked armor to kill their foes. Both have dogs that die assisting their plight, and both reptilian monsters are being fed tributes of milk. Such a weird element that.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe it fits the archetype of the dragon as a parasitic, gluttonous creature. Often these beasts are servants or pets of the devil as well, or are at least brought about by some ungodly behaviour, as in the tale of the dragon of Brent Pelham. And the dragons can be outsmarted often by churchmen, such as the dragons of Christchurch or St Albans.
This could be that the same stories are heard and retold as often happened with a more local flavour. So, in an age of travelling storytellers making their living from town to town at halls and taverns, what better way to pull an audience in to the tale that you heard 100 miles away, one that none of those listening would have heard before necessarily or be familiar with, by spinning it around a local hill or lake or other landmark that they'd all know, that they'd all be familiar with. Another explanation, just as valid, is that the minds of the populace at that time, where these stories are first being told at, they all held the same worries, the same fears, and the same senses of wonder, so these things appealed to them all. They understood perhaps better than us the dangers of powerful tyrants, hoarding gold, lording it above everyone else, ruling a populace with terror, influencing everyday lives, these hoarders of wealth, and the desire for a noble hero to free them from those shackles. Can you imagine living in such a time? Anyway.
So why do dragons and dragon stories persist? Dragons are the ultimate cryptid in a way, majestic, terrifying, and be they dinosaurs or actual fire-breathing monsters, they have stuck around. Partly because, let's face it, they're cool, the backbone to what we think of as high fantasy now.
Yeah, I suppose it's not, after all, called Dungeons and Goblins or Dungeons and Krakens, is it? Although I do want to play that one. That sounds cool.
Yeah, I'd play Dungeons and Krakens.
Sounds more rummy. Dragons are definitely not just a phenomenon in Western and Northern Europe. All across the world, from China to the Americas, Africa to the Middle East, we have variations on these creatures, which lends credence to their origins maybe being linked to dinosaur bones.
Or them being real.
Oh yeah, of course, and that.
Now, these dragons can represent everything from luck and wisdom to curses and doom. But in England and the countries that have had historical impact on our folklore, they are mostly the latter. Beowulf battled the dragon and lost his life against it. Fafnir was slain by Sigurd at the behest of Regin. These dragons are greedy. They hoard wealth. They take what isn't theirs as a common bully, despite their power and supposed nobility. They are majestic creatures with petty mindsets. Even Smaug is nearly outwitted by Bilbo by the hobbit flattering the vain creature. In medieval heraldry, we see dragons and their variants aplenty. This is mostly meant to give a sense of grandeur, an emblem that signifies strength, nobility, guardianship, for dragons are often guardians of great treasure. Sometimes this can have a more literal, direct connection. On the outer walls of Bisterne Manor in the New Forest, you can find the heraldry put in place in the time of the Berkeley family. Their family coat of arms changed to incorporate the beast after Maurice Berkeley slew the Bisterne dragon.
I mean, in my mind, they represent two things that tie in together, I guess. Firstly, the dangers of greed. Another common thread in dragon stories is the curse of gold that they lay upon, something captured well by Tolkien. But this is best shown sort of in folklore in the tale of Fafnir, who was once a dwarf. But when his family came into possession of gold already cursed, he murdered his father, nearly murdered his brother Regin before stealing away with it. Fafnir becomes corrupted by his deed, trusting no one, obsessed with his hoard. And he finds an old barrow, which is another common haunt for dragons in Northern European folklore. He hides there with this hoard, and eventually he is so obsessed with it and it corrupts him so much, just the greed and the malice, he becomes a literal dragon or a worm. Here he remains until Regin brings Sigurd to slay him. The curse does not die with the beast, however, and Regin plots to take the treasure for himself by killing the hero. He instructs Sigurd to cook Fafnir's heart. He plans to kill him while distracting him with this task. However, a blister forms on the heart from the heat of the fire, as Sigurd is turning it. And noticing the blister, Sigurd quickly pops it with his thumb, burns his thumb, and pops it in his mouth. And as he had the taste of the heart, he is endowed with magical powers. Among them is understanding the language of birds. And one of these birds quickly informs him of Regin's plan. Sigurd manages to turn around just as Regin's sneaking up on him and slays the dwarf with the sword that he forged for Sigurd to slay the beast. Now, this curse does go on to haunt the family of Sigurd for generations through the treasure, the main piece of which being a cursed ring.
Yeah, that all sounds very Tolkien.
Yeah, it does a little bit. He comes up now and then. The other thing they represent is the conquering of adversity. As you mentioned, Tolkien, I will talk about him. Back in the 30s, he did a Christmas children's lecture on dragons, which I'd have given my left nut to have seen. Yours too, actually, as well. I'd have given yours.
You don't want my left nut. It's not. It's not good.
That's why I'm giving it away. He called them something along the lines of the final test for the hero. And he's right. They are the final boss fight, the end baddie. They represent that one last heroic push to victory and the notion that ultimately, however powerful, however evil a foe is, they can be defeated by courage and a pure heart. It was the function of dragons to tax the skill of our heroes, and still more to tax other things, especially courage. Armies cannot overcome them. Dragons can only be defeated by brave men, usually alone. And so for me, the dragon, metaphorical or literal, is there to remind us that we can all borrow from the archetype of the dragon slayer. At some point in our lives, we all have a task that requires us to venture into those dark places we don't usually want to go, to summon the last reserves and resolve of courage, and to face down our own dragons. And that, I think, is summed up best by the writer G.K. Chesterton. We do not tell fairy tales so that our children will think dragons existed. They already know dragons exist. We tell them fairy tales so they know dragons can be killed.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we haven't done on episodes for quite a while that we used to talk is like where we stand on something. So, Andy, do you believe in dragons?
Interesting enough, I wrote something and got rid of it, but not necessarily a belief thing. But when I was a kid and I first heard of time slips and things like that, and that story about the Romans up in York, I was like, what if dragons? And this is like 8-year-old me. What if dragons were people in the past seeing aeroplanes going over at a time slip? Because like the pilots wouldn't necessarily know. If they just popped over for a little bit, they wouldn't know because they're like well high up. You know, like maybe these, think about it, it's metallic, so it's shiny, it's roaring, fire belching from it. It's fucking dragon, man.
Mm-hmm.
That
wasn't the question though, was it?
No, it wasn't. But I wanted to get that in. I guess not really. I believe dragons in what they represent to people. I think,
So you don't think they ever existed?
I think not necessarily. So, what do we qualify as a dragon?
Well, we've just done a whole episode on Andy. Were you not paying attention?
But okay, so I think things similar. You could argue that things like drakes existed, or worms, big fucking salamander things that didn't breathe fire. They existed. Komodo dragons, for example. But I don't think the fire-breathing winged variety existed.
Fair enough.
What about you?
Yeah, 100%. Fire-breathing dragons. Obviously, the bones don't exist because they rot away, right? There's just.
Well, yeah, they got to be lighter. Obviously, they're lighter, made of a different material because
exactly. It's all about how they fly.
They can fly, yeah. Although one of the best dragon films in my mind is an animated film from the 80s, I think, called Flight of Dragons.
Not seen it.
It's brilliant. It's really good. And the dragons in that, they eat rocks, and it's like basically this static. They basically produce sort of, I think it's helium or something else. I can't remember what gas they produce in their bellies, and then they eat rocks to sort of like get a static charge that they can ignite to breathe fire, and that also helps them control like how high they. So they're not technically flying; they're sort of levitating with gas. And because the main character is this scientist that's been like taken to this magical world, and he's like trying to explain everything with science. I won't give any more away, but it's a good film. Good film.
All right. All right. Well, I was going to bring it up in a minute, but you're on films now, so best dragon film. I mean, you've just said that was it. Any others you want to bring
Um,
up?
so obviously the Hobbit films. I loved Smaug in the Hobbit films. I'm not a massive fan of the Hobbit films compared to say Lord of the Rings, but I think Smaug was done really good. Um, I think.
I mean, anything. I think Martin Freeman is just brilliant casting, and he's a really good actor.
Oh yeah, yeah, phenomenal. Like as
Uh,
Bilbo for me, that was a perfect casting. I tell you what, which I wouldn't say it's my favourite by any stretch, but something that I found really kind of oddly enjoyable was they did a Moby Dick story, but it's dragons. So they go along on these basically land ships, these armored carts, like steam powered carts, harpooning dragons for like basically dragon oil, which they use to make fire and they use to light all the lanterns. Vinnie Jones is in it, so it's that kind of film. But he's kind of the Ahab character, I think. But yeah, there's or someone else is, but they're going around looking for this white dragon, you know. I can't remember
we
the name of it,
mentioned
but yeah.
we mentioned Beowulf earlier. I have to say I don't mind the version everyone hates on.
I
Come to
really
kill
like
your monster.
I'm here to kill your monster and rob your nan. Yeah, sort of the proper sort of. Yeah, I thought I was. I remember the scene where he bursts out of the sea monster's eye in there, and I was
Yeah,
pissing myself when that happened. I was like, that was so well done, just bursting out, Beowulf.
yeah. I enjoyed it. I mean, yeah, I know problematic now because certain people that were involved with writing it, but
Yeah, true, true. But
um,
Ray Winston's cool.
Ray Winston liked one of our posts on Instagram not
He
long ago.
did, yes, yeah, yeah. He's buddy Mark
It's-
Ryan getting the
yeah, that's kind
Sherwood gang back together.
of.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned Hobbit. I mean, How to Train Your Dragon being turned live action this year.
Yes, it is. Now, I wanted to bring up that actually because not that in particular, but the whole modern notion of and we've talked about this before, but this modern notion of dragons being friendly in like a lot of Western cinema now, because like in like Eastern like folklore, the dragons quite often are friendly or benevolent or guardians, but I like my Western dragons to be bastards. I want them to be horrible. I want them to be defeated. And cutesy
But
up dragons.
toothless.
Cutesy up dragons kind of takes away the point of dragons in my mind.
How to Train Your Dragon. The whole trilogy is brilliant. I love all of them.
They are good. They are good.
I'm actually quite looking forward to the live action because I saw the trailer for it. It looks quite good.
I haven't actually seen that yet. I'll give that a watch.
Yeah. I know they have to turn everything live action these days, but I was I was watching Moana at the cinema, Moana 2
Mhm.
with the ocean, and it
Yeah.
was one of the trailers that came up. And at first, you get these little glimpses, and it's like horned helmets, and I'm like, oh God, what are they doing? It's horned helmets. You know it's going to be Viking related, and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, what is this? And then it took a while for me to do, and I was like, oh no, it's How to Train Your Dragon. That's fine.
Dude, at least if it's like a Viking thing, even if it's shit, you'll get some book sales because people will get interested in Vikings for a bit again. Although, How to Feed Your Dragon, new book.
I was going to say How to Eat Your Dragon.
How to Eat Your Dragon.
Well, you talked earlier about how you spit roast the heart, you can understand the bird song, right? So,
That's it. That's it.
um,
Very similar to the tale of Finmar's Call and the Salmon of Knowledge. That one, but
mhm.
again, one of those reoccurring things. Um, but
um,
yes,
yeah, the other film I was going to bring up was Rain of Fire.
Reign of Fire is excellent. That is a brilliant film.
Long time since I've seen it, so I can't like say whether it still stands up, but I remember loving it.
It's a great idea. It is just a brilliant idea. Like dragons appear and just like basically wreck the world.
Yeah. It's sort of like kind of zombie apocalypse, but dragons,
Exactly,
basically,
exactly.
right?
You know, And the fact that like in Britain and the rest of Europe, I'm assuming they're like holding out in castles.
Yeah.
It's like big buildings of stone. It sort of makes sense. But
I have to watch it again now because it's been a long time since I've seen
yeah,
it.
me too. Yeah.
And the other one that I want to mention just because of the voice is Dragonheart.
Yeah, phenomenal film. Yeah. Just the
One of
bit
the
where he's
best
like
dragon voices.
stuck in his throat.
Yeah. Yeah, that ends the film section. Now, books. Right.
So one thing we could talk about is just bringing it back to St. George's Day, I guess, because again, I was at one point thinking of making a St. George's Day episode, like about St. George, and I'm sure we could maybe make one in the future. It happens to come around every year because there are lots of different places that hold St. George as a patron saint, or at least really make a thing of it. And one of them is Catalonia, where Becky, where my girlfriend's from, and over there, which I'll be doing today as this episode comes out. I will be giving her a rose and a book, which is what you do on St. George's Day in Catalonia. Well, actually, technically, I should give her a rose and she should give me a book, but she likes books, so I'm going to give her both. So, on the topic of flying things, I suppose, we recently had a comment on a episode of ours on the Falkirk Triangle from Ruth, who actually saw something quite close by what she described as a UAP or a UFO. So she's come along to speak to us. So here is Ruth.
Back in 97, I was with my boyfriend. We were together 3 years at that point, and I'd already passed my test when I was 21 and hadn't driven for 4 years. And I have two children, I should say. They were quite wee then, and they were up in Scotland, and we were in Norfolk, so I was going to collect them because they'd been on holiday. So I was going to drive us all the way up there. So it was quite a big deal. I'd never driven for 4 years, and it was all the way to near enough Aberdeen from Montrose. Sorry, Montrose I was going to, but from Norfolk. And so I wanted to drive overnight, and it was just the two of us, me and Danny. And we drove and got to the borders about midnight. And then as we set off again, must have been half an hour stop, maybe 20 minutes. And in between the borders and Edinburgh, it's a long, bendy, long, windy road. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it was dark as well.
Yeah.
And I'm still nervous, but I'm quite relaxed actually, because I've gotten used to it after 6 hours. And I start noticing signs to my right, talking about a nuclear power station off to the right. And I'm like, oh, look, there's nuclear. And I look at him and he's looking out the window. And as I look at him, like the trees have passed and the fields opened up and there's a light over there. And I see it and I goes, what's that light? And he goes, I don't know, I've just spotted it. And I'm like, yeah, but what is it? And it's like, it's not a helicopter. What is it? And it's way over there and it's coming towards us and it's sort of bouncing. And I would say it's almost like a drunk driver and sort of bouncing and not as high as a house, not even that high. And it was kind of skimming. And it was almost like a Malteser shape. And it was bright, but it was silvery. And it was quite fast because it was coming towards us. It was like, oh, what is that? And then in that moment, it's right above us. It's gigantic. It's not that little thing anymore. It's a great big UFO. It is gigantic.
So when you say, sorry, just to interrupt briefly, when you say it's above you, how far away above you is this?
I was going to ask.
Not that far. Like, we can see it's this big. It's the whole sky, and there's lights everywhere. It's higher than a house, maybe 2 houses high, but it's not that high.
Yeah,
really,
sure.
There's no vibration. There's no sound. There's all these lights, and it's a circle. But I kind of felt like a triangle at the same time, so it's hard to describe. But at the same time, I was excited. I'm quite young at this point. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. Oh, we've got to stop. So I'm slowing down. And Danny, complete opposite, terrified, absolutely, put your foot down, put your foot down, put your foot down. And he was screaming at me. And I'm like, yeah, but wait, look. And I did slow down a little bit and he got more scared. And at that point I thought, actually, yeah, this is quite scary. But I didn't think that in those words. I just felt a little shiver down the bottom of my spine and the thought of not getting to my kids. And in that moment, it took off like a flea and it was gone.
Wow. So, if you don't mind me asking, what was the car journey conversation like straight after that? Like, how was the rest of your journey?
I'm quite an excitable person who's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
look. You know, and he is too. And he was scared, but and we were literally talking about what I just said, you know, him being scared and me not. And like, you should have put your foot down quicker. And I'm like, yeah, but we should have stopped, you know, that kind of conversation. So,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like, probably shouldn't have stopped. Yeah, you were right. Let's keep going. Mum's. And we talked about nothing else, obviously, the whole way to my mum's. Got there about 6 a.m., 6:30, I can't remember exactly, but it was definitely 6 a.m. ish. And told my mum, and she's like, oh, God, you know, I don't, you know, what are you on? And that kind of thing. And we were excited about it. Obviously, I've got my kids then. And the very next day, this is how we know the date, Diana died.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was going to say, yeah, it's yeah. I suppose that is an easy date to remember, isn't it?
Yeah.
I like to think if I was in that situation, I'd have your reaction, but I'd probably have Danny's reaction. I think in reality, I'd probably run, you know. But
Yeah.
Did it initially? Did you say it came from the direction of the nuclear plant, or was it?
No, it was almost as if it was going to the nuclear plant.
That's
Okay.
interesting.
Impression, like it was on its way when it saw us and thought, "Ta-da! Look at me!" And we laugh about it now because me and Danny did split up a couple of years later. We didn't speak for years, and then a few years ago we got speaking again, and we thought, "Oh, that really happened." Yeah, we can talk to each other, and we know, we don't have to go, "Oh yeah," because we both know, and we revised the whole night because it was like he remembered things I couldn't, I remembered things he couldn't, and we were able to give each other a little bit more context because he was in the passenger seat. So when it transformed, he says he saw that. I never saw that. I just saw it was there, and then it was there. He saw the bit in between. I never. So I can't describe that to you. So I don't know if that's what made him more scared than me. I don't know. And there were just elements that he was able to, because he always worries about the time. Like he thinks that the time it took to get from where we were to my mum's from that point was a lot longer than it should have been. And if you Google it, that does look like it probably should have been a quicker journey. But then I'm trying to remember, did we not take the long route though? Because I was, the new driver. So I can't honestly say that it did or it didn't. I never felt like it did, but you never know.
I guess you could have been driving slower, being a new driver as well. Like,
Yeah, but
especially after that.
Yeah, I did get a bit confident though. I wasn't too like, oh, we must go slow. But there are a lot of windy roads and things like that, so you can't really through them unless you know them really well. So yeah,
it's interesting because you get a lot of reports of UFOs close to nuclear power plants. You know, there are a lot of reports of those. Have you spoke to anyone else who's seen anything around that area before? I mean, I don't know whether you reached out to people after this, or you wanted to sort of just keep it to yourself.
It was 97. There was no internet. Didn't have phones. We lived in the country. People thought we were mad. Our friends didn't because they knew we wouldn't tell a story like that and go, "Oh, we made it up." There was just no budginess on what happened because it happened. But as time has moved on, a few years ago, I found MUFON and I thought, "Oh, they'll listen to me. I'll tell them." So I went to their website and told them what I've just told you. And I did get a phone call from a really nice gentleman. And I will call him a gentleman because he spoke ever so well. He sounded just like Sean Connery, no joke. We had a good chat for about an hour, and he was a UFO investigator and trying to catch me out. He was literally trying to trip me up. That was his job, to see if I was trying to fool him. And I told him about the nuclear power station. He's like, "Oh, well, that's it. You're telling me lies because there is no nuclear power station in that area. What are you talking about?" And I googled it because I was like, oh, pretty sure, yeah, I'm 100% sure. And it turns out it's Torness nuclear power station. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. And I'm thinking, I'm quite a good investigator. Googled it. But the other thing that I then discovered that he told me that I didn't know about is the Falkirk Triangle. I knew
that was going to be my next question, was whether you were
So-
aware of it at the time. Yeah.
I've
not
heard
at
that.
the time, but since found out. And I
Yeah.
looked on the map, and it's not exactly in the triangle as it's drawn on the map, but it's near enough. So you know, it's that area of Scotland. So yeah,
Wow.
and it just feels like a duty to give testimony, because there are others. I know there must be. We can't be the only ones, and I want them to know they're not the only ones, and I want them to not feel like we did. You know,
Yeah.
there's nobody to talk to or nobody else telling their testimony. And for
I think
me,
it's more accepted today than it maybe was back in the 90s. I think,
Yeah.
especially with the current kind of UAPs and stuff, I think it's more in the news than it would have been before. So it's probably the right time to talk about it.
yeah, definitely. And that's what I'm feeling at this point as well. We spoke again recently over the past few months, and he actually paid for me to go and get hypnotism. And I did go and get hypnotized because I thought, what, get hypnotized? I want to see if there's anything else that I can add to what I can remember. But I can't honestly say that it did any different. I'm going to stick to what I know, because I don't know that I was hypnotized, or I was relaxed enough, or I wasn't too expectant, or if it's, you know, how you watch loads of cultural aliens over the years, is it that's feeding my imagination? Or, you know, I don't want any of that to blur what I know did happen.
It sounds like you're going about it a really sensible way, you know, quite pragmatic in the sort of not wanting to muddy the waters with that. You're right. Wow, yeah. I mean, did that change your belief for them? If you don't mind me asking, did you believe before in sort of UFOs, UAPs?
I never disbelieved it, to be fair. Quite open-minded, but I didn't go looking for them, and I didn't expect to see one. I would have always been open to the idea, though. And do you remember those Smash Make Smash adverts back in the 70s? I don't know how old you are, but this was...
doesn't ring a bell, no.
No, little robots, and they're like... So,
I think I do know.
You know,
Yeah.
I just remember the adverts on TV when I was little, and when me and Tan talk about it, we have to laugh because we imagine that's them somewhere in the universe going, "Do you mind that night we went and scared them too in that car?" And then go, and just thinking why we're sat there thinking about them, they must be sat there thinking about us. That's how we think.
I've always liked that idea, you know. It's like they're sort of pranking humans, pranking Earthlings, you know.
Yeah, I also.
So I guess.
Oh, sorry.
Go on. No, you go on. Go on.
Yeah. It's just another thought that I didn't have for a lot of years. I always imagined UFOs came from outer space, but more recently, I've been watching Jason Breshears, and I've been wondering, are they coming from inner space?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just a thought, though. There's nothing. That's just my perspective.
That was going to be, that was kind of where I was going next. Is what do you kind of imagine they are? Because there's ideas as well. The submersibles, whether they've been here the whole time, whether they're us from the future, or if they are, like you say, from another planet. So I didn't know kind of what your, I suppose, gut feeling is. What do you feel about?
I have no clue. But I do like the ideas that Jason's coming along with, as in the simulacrum. You know, we are inside this kind of thing that we've got to break out of, and that there is no outer space. It's just a reflection of what is real, that kind of thing. So I wonder if they are from inside or behind the Arctic, Arctic wall, that kind of place. I don't know, but I'd love to know. But at the same time, I had to get to my kids because I had a job to do, and it almost more recently it occurred to me: did they react to me changing my mind? Because that is the moment they took off.
Yeah,
because there is an idea that they can kind of rethought and stuff, isn't there? So
Yeah, sort of
maybe they were aware
intentions.
of you. Yeah.
It's like, oh, she doesn't want a trip around the universe tonight. Oh well, let's go.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So do you feel like they were? Do you feel like they were there for the nuclear plant, or is that just a kind of coincidence?
I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's exactly what they were there for, because I literally had just been reading signs off to the right, nuclear power station. Next thing, this thing happens. And it's coming from over there and heading towards there.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's exactly what I think.
You're on your way to your kids. How old were they at the time?
Oh my God.
I was just wondering if you told them.
Oh yeah, of course they did. Yeah. They love me. What can I say? They were 12 and 8 at the time. About there. Yeah. And so they're now 37, 33. So, you know, they do go, yes, mum. Of course, mum.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I bet at that age they were just jealous they didn't see it.
I don't think they were jealous. I just think they were excited for us. I know they, were taking it in the way we were given it. But I think my daughter's probably a little bit more I don't know that either of them's that skeptical, actually. I think they both have got their minds open to it, but unless it happened to them, they're not going to go, oh my God, yes,
And presumably you haven't experienced, you didn't have a recurrence, you didn't see them again?
Never.
No.
Never.
No.
But it's so epic. And it's getting to the point now, if I don't share this story, will I ever share it? And it has to get out there somehow, just to record that there's been another sighting at that time frame.
Yeah.
And it was really big. Like when I hear other people, I oh, something way off in the distance, and I'm like, that isn't what we had. It's right above us. So it must happen to others too. It must do.
Yeah, presumably if they went towards like the nuclear plant, someone else must have seen it that night as well. So I'd be interested if anyone else ever heard your story and came forward to say they saw it too.
I'd love to hear that. But there was nobody else on that road that night with us.
Yeah.
So it was quite a long bit of road as well. So not that I can remember. I'm not saying there was nobody, definitely, because I can't remember everything. But as far as I'm aware, I can't remember anybody being about.
Yeah, might be worth looking to see if there's any like reported encounters or sightings in the area around that time, rather than that maybe that instance. Quite often you'll see when we covered the Falkirk Triangle, you'll have like it will go quiet, but then something will happen, and it will be over a few days. Different people will see things.
Yeah.
So possibly, yeah.
Yeah, the Falkirk Triangle is really interesting because it seems to be the 90s or 80s, 90s. And this was the tail end of the 90s, but I've heard a lot at the beginning of the 90s as well.
I'm trying to think who it was that was the main investigator of that. It's been a while since we did it. But I wonder whether they would have any other stories. We're going to have to dig back into the Falkirk Triangle now and see whether we can.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
Correlation anyway.
If they're still about there, the UFOs and the drones are happening now. So there's definitely no drones involved because there were no drones back in those days.
No, exactly. Yeah. So you had remote control helicopters that could sort of go about like 12 feet from your controller before crashing.
What was that? Because in the Falkirk Triangle, I'm going off memory now, but there was the guy that witnessed. There was a ball, wasn't there, with bits coming off of it? I thought on the sides. It's been so long since we've done it.
Yeah, I don't know all the stories. I just know that because I didn't know anything about the Falkirk Triangle. Like, we're talking for until where are we now? It's almost 30 years ago. I mean, it might have been about 7 years ago I learned of the Falkirk Triangle, and it was literally a good 20 years there that never occurred to me. I never knew there were other sightings in that area.
There was a guy because he ended up tearing his trousers or something. It was in the back.
Yes, yeah. I remember that. Yeah,
and that was a sphere, wasn't it?
I think so.
yeah, like, yeah, it's not massive. And I thought a Malteser shape. That's kind of
Yeah.
shape I thought I was looking at. And it was almost like it was skimming something. Sort of
Yeah.
that kind of, the way, is it a dragonfly moves? I don't know. But it it was a spherical Malteser sort of shape,
Yeah.
saucer shape, I suppose. But yeah, it
Mhm.
wasn't massive. It was not massive, but then it was. So it did transform. And when it took off like a flea, it was so quick. It was just gone. There was no knowing. Like, it kind of went that way. It might have been that little dot in the sky now. It was gone.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, that's it. That's my testimony. Yeah, I know Dan might not be so comfortable talking about it, but together we had this experience. So we support each other because obviously we know it happened. But I personally feel it's important to get it out there, just because exactly where we are in time at this point. Lots of
Yeah.
people do want to know what goes on in the world and are a little bit more open to it. And I really wouldn't want to hang on to a fictitious story for 27 years. I just haven't got the energy to make anything up. And it's not something I'm ever going to want to forget, quite honestly. So,
Yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, I just had a quick look. Apparently, in um, around August, there was a few sightings in Scotland, not quite where you were talking about, but one of them was like a round, shiny object. And
okay.
another one described as Toblerone shaped. But we're going with
Huh.
the chocolate shaped ones with Maltese Toblerones, aren't we?
There's some chocolate
I was going to say. I think it's after the sighting, you're sort of scared and your adrenaline's up, and so you crave sugar. So it's like, yeah, it was definitely chocolate shaped.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there was
Yeah.
one on the North Sea on around the 18th of August. So yours would have been the 30th of August.
Yeah,
Um,
a couple of days later,
yeah,
basically. And obviously, the North Sea was in that direction.
yeah, it was.
So it was going towards either the nuclear power station or the North Sea or both.
It was
Mhm.
near Fraserburgh, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's just like Scotland's
yeah,
quite big, obviously, but I
yeah,
think you can fly at those speeds. You can zip about pretty quickly and be in all sorts of places in very little time. So I don't know. I mean,
Mm.
um, what's that film where that young lad goes around in a little saucer? It's
Flight of the Navigator.
yeah,
yeah.
come on, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I love that film.
almost like yeah, it's almost like he could have been driving it for all I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually showed that to my daughter quite recently.
What did you think?
I think she liked it. I don't know, it's hard to tell, isn't it, with these nostalgic things for us.
I think you know, back in the days of VHS, you have certain tapes that you wore out through viewing so much. Flight of the Navigator was one of mine.
Mine was a Terminator. Absolutely love that film. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else I can tell you really about it, but
No, we really appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
Yeah.
no, it's been a
Yeah.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for
We
giving
will when
me.
I don't know which episode this will go into, but we'll put it in as probably around the weird news segment we do on one of the upcoming
Yeah,
episodes. We're a few episodes ahead of ourselves, so it might not go out straight away, but don't panic. It's not because we're not going to put it out. It's just we've got
Yeah.
to fit it in around the other stuff. So yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Thank
it
you.
doesn't have to be something relevant, but if there is something that's coming up that we're doing that's vaguely relevant, we'll probably put it in there. But otherwise, it could be on the end of something else completely. We're just really glad you came on.
Yeah.
So
I trust your
Yeah.
judgment, and yeah, I really thank you for the opportunity because I've been a little bit frustrated. I feel like I've tried to share my story, not too hard, but it's almost like people are a bit, So you two came to me,
Yeah.
and it's fabulous. Yeah,
Right. Okay. Well, actually, so one last point I'll ask you then is because I've had this discussion with a few people. When you're say, let's use down the pub for example. If you were to say you believed in or you'd seen a ghost, most people will go along with the ghost story. You can tell the ghost story. But when we talk about aliens and UFOs, people are a little bit more, oh, let's get my tinfoil hat and kind of poke
Yeah,
fun a lot more.
yeah, yeah.
Um, been trying to work out why that is lately, because they're both almost as believable or not as you like, right?
We had a similar thing, didn't we, Craig? You know, sort of at it sort of got us talking in Salisbury Cathedral. We were filming, and a lady came and asked us about it. We mentioned the historical, we mentioned ghosts, and then as soon as we said UFO, just glazed over. You know, so. But yeah, sorry, Carrie. So what do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Cognitive dissonance. It's all too scary, I think, to be actually, we're not the only planet in this universe that has life that can communicate and think, and what if they're in control? There's just so many avenues you can go down, but I reckon they've been here all the time. They've never not been here, and if they were gonna hurt us, we'd all be gone by now. Or maybe that's happened already and we've been reset, who knows? But we could be a big experiment. If you think too hard about it, would you go out your front door? I don't know. You just not got to be living in fear. Just I think if they are around and they do want us to know, we'll soon find out. We won't be guessing.
Yeah, because a lot of people that see things in the realms of UFOs often experience poltergeist-like activity afterwards. So it is almost like the things are connected, but one is taken more seriously than the other.
To be fair, I am a spiritualist and I can see, hear, sense, so I know I have, quite acute senses. So I don't know if that's part of the reason why they felt comfortable revealing themselves. I don't know, because I only later found out, actually I am quite sensitive to these things. So maybe, I don't know. So I'm still trying to remain objective about it, because me and Danny were, there at the same time, and we both have quite open minds to the world. But at the same time, he was terrified. He was really scared. And in retrospect, because you know how clear my throat. When we first met, he told me when he was little he'd had quite a scary experience with what he thought was an abduction. So I took that on board when I first met him. Okay, but in retrospect, I wonder if he was experiencing the same kind of fear that he felt he'd had previously. I don't know.
Do you know if it was a similar type craft that he'd experienced before that, or you ever said?
The picture that I have of what he told me was it had parked in the car park at the back of a pub, because that's where they lived at the time. And I don't know if, I don't doubt what he tells me, because I know what happened when we saw what we saw. So, there's always kinds of ways of building stories around these things. So, that's because of that. Or, maybe we are just open, aware people. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for coming on anyway. And
really appreciate
your
it.
Story.
Again, pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Bye. So, Andy, have you got any weird news?
I do actually. This one is from a few days ago. Well, as of time of recording, so the 21st of March. And it's from Margate in Kent. Spooked beachgoers at popular UK resort discover strange skeleton washed up.
Ooh.
Might be Nessie, might be Jormungandr, might be a worm. Paula Reagan has told us she came across the weirdest thing at the beach at Margate, Kent, with the head appearing to be skeletal and the back was soft and squidgy. Ugh. Beachgoers found a strange skeleton-like figure which washed up on the shore at a British beach and left them puzzled at what it could be. Paula Regan stumbled across the eerie object while enjoying a seaside walk with her husband Dave in Margate, Kent on Monday, March the 10th, and a crowd gathered to look at it. Photos show what looks like a skeletal mermaid hybrid. partially buried in sand and surrounded by seaweed, with a skeletal head and tail-like structure. Speculation surrounding the bizarre item washed up at the sea includes theories it could be a ship's figurehead, flotsam, or an art installation. Speaking of the moment they encountered it, Mrs. Regan said, "It was last Monday, a beautiful sunny day. We thought we'd blow the cobwebs away with a walk along the beach. The beach was completely empty, so it really stood out. At first, I thought it was a bit of driftwood, or maybe a dead seal, because I could see those funny tail fin things. When we got up to it, it was the weirdest thing. For the life of me, I can't tell you what it was. The head looked skeletal, but the back part, where the fishtail was all soft and squidgy. It didn't feel slimy or decomposed, but it was definitely strange. Images show other beachgoers gathering round, appearing to try and figure out what they were looking at. Mrs. Regan, who lives in London with her husband, said people started coming over for a look. A small crowd gathered. People walking their dogs, passers-by, even a man setting up the beach huts came over. Nobody could work out what it was. Some thought it might have fallen off a boat, while others suggested it could be a figurehead from a ship, like one of those carved mermaids. I just knew no one would believe us if we didn't take a picture." And they've got a nice little pose next to it as well.
So I guess that's a good chance for you to screen share and show me what you're talking about.
Absolutely. 1 second, I'll just finish off. Thanet District Council says it has made teams aware but declined to comment on the mysterious creature. People taking social media to give their views on the strange discovery, which included light heart comments. One person wrote, "I'm thinking Margate is the UK's Area 51. While others questioned, we all know that's actually Rendlesham Woods. While others questioned the find, saying, it's as real as in biologically or a toy. And is that how you found it sticking out of the sand like that? Hilarious. That doesn't make sense. But yes, I will screen share the picture, actually. There we go. So
yeah.
it's definitely a model of sorts, but it's a horrible little looking thing.
I'll tell you what, I'd love to find something like that and have that on the shelf up here. That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
Right.
I wonder what did they do with it? Does it say?
I think they just left it there. I don't know if anyone's taken it away yet. I'll have to join one of those spotted in.
Is that Fu the Shih Tzu in the background?
I reckon
he was
so.
dead. Has he gone to live with someone else? The bastard. He told me he was dead.
Reformed from the ashes. Yeah, that's the fishy tail. You can definitely. It might just be the seaweed, but they just stroking the seaweed. Oh look, there's a picture of them.
That sounds like a euphemism, stroking the seaweed.
They got kind of the Royston Vasey face there.
Oh, it's bigger than it looked in the other picture. We didn't ban him.
Tabs. Oh. I'm sorry. He does. He looks a bit like it. Anyway, that's mean. But yeah, I'd love to find something like that. But it is. Yeah, you think like from the first picture, it's like a little model, you know. But it's pretty, you know.
Yeah, I was envisioning like just a little Hecate-sized statue.
That's
But that's big. Yeah.
what she said. Right. But yeah, there's my weird news story for you. Quite light-hearted. Unless you find that sort of thing utterly cursed, in which case, you know, sorry.
I say I want to know what they did with it. They didn't mention.
Why haven't they sent it to us?
Mm.
So have you got any weird news for us, Craig?
Yeah, obviously.
Obs.
Come on. How long have we done this show now, Andy?
Go on, lay it on us.
This is a Metro article. Mystery of eerie ghost lights plaguing town finally solved. So it's kind of weird, but also had been solved. So this is about glowing balls, Andy.
I got some of those.
It's been all a lot about balls today, isn't it?
Cat balls.
So the mystery of ghost lanterns haunting a town in South Carolina might have been solved. So we'll see what we think, eh? The glowing balls of light have often been spotted by an old railway track and were said to belong to the ghost of a woman who lost her husband in a train accident. Now, a scientist believes earthquakes might be behind the spooky phenomena. The ghostly glowing lights in a remote area of Somerville, South Carolina have been recorded since the mid 20th century alongside reports of slamming doors, footsteps, and disturbed animals and birds. Legend has it that the lights are lanterns carried by a ghost whose husband lost his head in a train accident. They've always lost their head, these ghosts.
Right.
A seismologist for the US Geological Survey, Susan Ho, Hough, Ho, has
How? Might be
crashed.
how.
She's crashed the party for ghost hunters as she believes the lights are nothing to do with anything paranormal at all.
Oh.
She argues in a research paper in January the lanterns were actually a phenomenon called earthquake lights. Earthquake lights have been reported across the world and are described as balls of light, streamers, and steady glows which are visible around the time of an earthquake. Seismologists are yet to agree a theory for why these lights appear in the first place. One expert has suggested they are a result of underground gases like methane or radon, ignited by static electricity or rock movement. But yeah, she says the theory makes the most sense when it comes to the Somerville ghost lanterns. She studied the first reports of the glowing lights in the 50s and 60s and found they coincided with 3 magnitude 3.5 and 4.4 earthquakes that took place only a few kilometers away. The theory is that even smaller, unrecognizable earthquakes have occurred since.
Interesting.
Yes, so it could have a rational explanation, but
I'm preferring ghosts.
yeah, it was a ghost, mate. Ghost did it.
Ghost did it.
Yeah, that was it. I was going to do another story about how one of the states was going to legalize cockfighting, but only if they were fighting robots. But the actual article wasn't that interesting. So
yeah,
it was a good headline.
yeah, it was.
So we are going to do an after weird, right?
Yes.
I've got another short dragon story that I wrote years ago that I was going to tell for the after weird, and I also wanted to. We're going to have to decide what we're going to do, but there's this other thing I heard about today, the Central Park papers, and I gather once you read them, you're not supposed to tell anyone for 10 years. So we need to decide if we're going to do it or not.
Ah.
Yeah, so you can find the Substack at www.wyrdwessex.co.uk. That's weird, W-Y-R-D. In case you haven't worked that out yet.
It's weird, just like worm is W-Y-R-M.
Yes.
Wyrd Worms. Wyrd Worms of Wessex. I should have written that.
So yeah, on that note, I've been Craig.
I've been Andy.
And until next time,
stay weird.
So yeah, the other story I've got similar to one we told earlier is The Maid and the Worm of Little Langford.
Ooh.